it's Carol Marak at carolmarak.com. Welcome to Solo and Smart, my YouTube channel where I offer tips, hopefully those that are achievable for individuals who are growing older and facing the challenges of living alone. And I have a special guest today, Arlene Glotzer, and she is the managing director of Eddie and Shine Group, a personal finance management services firm. And Arlene's background and career is in foreign currency risk management at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, Ford Motor Company, and New York banks. And during a break from her career, while caring for young children, Arlene did help with her parents, and she helped them manage their finances and to move to a more appropriate living situation. And while figuring out how to fund long-term care for her mother living with dementia, Arlene became immersed in tax and legal matters and developing relationships with caregivers. And she discovered the field of daily money management. And by the way, Arlene does have a master's from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Well, welcome, Arlene. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks very much, Carol. Nice to be with you.
Well, you know, money management is a huge concern. Even more so as we grow older, because sometimes, like your mother, unfortunately, managing finances can be pretty overwhelming for all of us. And it's wonderful to have been introduced to this, because I never knew that much about daily money managers until I met you and few other professionals in the industry. So I have a question concerning managing my money. For example, if I didn't want my sisters or even friends to have with the burden of managing my finances down the road, what can I do now to minimize their burden or the work that they have to do on my behalf?
It's a wonderful thing that you're thinking about at this stage in your life. And because there are numerous things that you can do now to prepare for efficient and safe financial management later in life. As you mentioned, potentially calling upon a family member. Well, we and elder law attorneys, trust and estates attorneys would definitely say one of the big things that is within your control right now is to identify and designate a trusted friend, family member, or even a professional as agent under power of attorney and or trustee, depending on how your estate plan is written. And then following through to take the steps to permit them access to the information that they need. So with that, we suggest that you think through what someone would need to know or what they would need to have access to or functions that they would need to do if the agent, again, this friend or family member, perhaps a niece or nephew or professional, if that person were to handle your financial management, if you were either temporarily or permanently incapacitated. Very simply, it could be, many of us bank online. Let's say if you were to feel comfortable with that agent to do that banking for you, how would the agent access your bank online? To tell you one thing, like right now, if you were to share with me your username and password for your bank, I can assure you that if I were to attempt to log in my computer, I would not be able to do so. And that's because the banks put in elements for your and everyone's protection, where there's a system of requiring another step to get online. So it's important to think that through and think of the logistics and mechanics of how that would work. And something even as simple as receiving your mail. Again, many people have their bills, let's say, paid automatically, but sometimes, even in that case, there may still be a bill or a one-off type of transaction that comes in the mail or physical and or email. And it's important to think through how would the person receive that information. Something else that's we consider to be definitely a best practice is as you age to take steps to simplify your finances. So what does that mean? That means, for a variety of reasons, many of us have accounts at a variety of banks. Sometimes it's because of a promotion or a legacy relationship, a variety of reasons, and then credit cards. Many of us take advantage of different promotions or have cards with, let's say, retail stores. Think about somebody else stepping into your situation. The important thing is think about consolidating your bank accounts and your credit cards to make things easier for someone to potentially step in on your behalf. One more thing that we've considered very important that I wanted to mention is that if you are somebody, let's say, who owns a long-term care insurance policy or many other types of insurance policies, then you know that premiums are due periodically. But particularly in the case of long-term care insurance, if you overlook, do not pay that premium, that policy that you potentially have paid into for decades at a not insignificant price could lapse. So one thing we suggest early on, as you plan for your later years, is to take advantage of what insurance companies offer as third-party notifications. So let's say, Carol, your long-term care insurance bill, you can say, send it to you, but also send it to my niece, and have a system to make sure that things don't get overlooked. So there are many other things that I could go into, but we will maybe leave it at that for now.
Okay, well, that's a lot of information. Thank you. And those are some really great things to, think about as we become, well, not so much planning ahead, which really it is. However, I like to think of it as organizing, getting organized. It's as simple as that.
Exactly. Many people call daily money managers financial organizers. And, exactly, you hit upon that. Very nice.
Oh, I like that name. That's a great term. And you brought up long-term care, and unfortunately, many people my age, think that Medicare is going to pay for long-term care, and as we all know, it does not. So for people that haven't really prepared for long-term care, what is needed and what should we start thinking about as soon as we can while we're still able?
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned Medicare. I know that when I first started getting involved with helping my parents and just, mentioning it to friends in casual conversation, they all said, "Oh, doesn't Medicare pay for that?" So, and these are, of course, educated, informed people. And, many, many years ago, I did not know or paid attention to the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. It just wasn't relevant to my life, but I've since become quite immersed in this. So I'm glad you mentioned that. No, you cannot count, at least in the current state of Medicare financing, that does not include, except, for very limited purposes, does not include financing for long-term care. And long-term care, we should define, let's say, as in my mother's case with dementia, where she needed ultimately round-the-clock care for what's called activities of daily living. So what we suggest to our clients, or what we see them having had done, which are best practices, is first to think through your living options, to decide what is the most suitable place for you to be as you age. So, ask yourself, do you want to stay in your longstanding home and hire caregivers as needed? Or would you prefer to move to a lower maintenance, perhaps more logistically suitable apartment, maybe on one level versus, a home with stairs, possibly an assisted living facility, or a continuing care retirement community, which um, uh, takes care of you as you potentially reach different levels of care, need different degrees of care. So, and again, identify the factors that are most important to you. For many people, it is proximity to friends and family members. For others, it might need to be, cost, lifestyle considerations. Do you like to be near, cultural institutions? Does that really enrich your life? Weather, obviously we know lots of people who choose as they age to move to warmer climates. So many choices. So there are so many choices, and each has its own financial considerations. Then we suggest that you educate yourself about the options and requirements for funding long-term care. So, I'll give you just a relatively brief list. I'm sure there are many, many other solutions that people come up with. That could be, if you have built a healthy nest egg, obviously could be drawing upon your investments. And then we recommend that you work with your financial planner and or investment management manager to figure out a suitable amount of withdrawal, in different periods. If you are still in your 50s or 60s, which tends to be the sweet spot, then perhaps consider buying a long-term care insurance policy. And these days, there are many other choices. They're called hybrid policies than there were when the insurance first was introduced. That's a YouTube video all into itself. We'll leave that for another time. Be utilizing a reverse mortgage if you own a home. And it could be planning and applying for Medicaid. Many people also find ways to enlist, friends and or family members as caregivers, and come up with some sort of private financial arrangement there. So there are financial pros and cons of each approach. And, and they also, you should consider the extent and quality of care that might be available under different funding scenarios. So there is no shortage of high caliber information online about this topic, as well as free seminars put on by elder law attorneys in many communities.
Yeah, that's right. And also another one to mention is the Area Agency on Aging. They have a wealth of information, as well as not person-to-person conferences anymore, but perhaps webinars as well. And they invite elder law attorneys and financial advisors and what have you, and fiduciaries to do presentations for people like me, so that we can become educated. So those are some good resources. Thank you. And then one last question, and this is certainly a topic that many of us worry about, and unfortunately we read about online, is that we're so susceptible to financial fraud. So how can we protect ourselves from financial fraud?
Right. That is unfortunately a very big worry and event among our client base. If we had more time, I could tell you numerous instances of fraud that we were aware of. Protecting, of course, suggests, taking actions prior to the fraud having been perpetrated. That is challenging, no doubt. One thing that definitely could help is, again, back to what I mentioned earlier, designating an agent under power of attorney. And that could be somebody who has limited powers, let's say, over your bank account. But then that person would have the authority, and hopefully, would monitor that bank account frequently to look for instances. Like in the case where, in some case, two instances that we found in our client base, it's because I was monitoring a client's activity online and not just, waiting for the statement to come at the end of the month, that I saw checks that were clearly not correct. And so, it was a case where it was like a cut and paste job, a signature, an actual signature that might have been obtained from our client's check that might have been fished from the mail, was applied to, another image with a different payee. So we were able to notice that, quite soon after it occurred. And so again, enlisting someone to help watch over your accounts as you age is very beneficial. Now, in those many, not all, but in many cases like that, when it is detected, when you then report it to the financial institution, so it could be the bank, we've seen things on credit cards, typically the funds are reversed or returned to you. So, again, that is certainly very beneficial to you. But what I did want to point out, though, is that the remedy that the banks, recommend is that you then close that existing account and open a new one, which, as you might know, that's, involves a considerable chore of other things that are going to need to be done because of that. Like that means that all of the automatic activity that you've had occurring, let's say in that checking account, could be direct deposit of your Social Security, deposit of your pension, investment funds, and then, auto payment of, let's say, utility bills and other types of bills. All of that needs to be redirected. So again, for somebody who might not have the executive functioning that they used to in later years, that's a considerable chore. So there are many, many ramifications of fraud, and I've just given you one or two types. Of course, we've all heard about many more. So again, I think the message is having somebody looking out for your own interests, a friend, somebody you trust, and it could even be a professional that you hire, is going to serve your interests very well.
Okay, thank you, Arlene. I personally would prefer working with a professional who is certified. And so what are the credentials of most daily money managers? Are you certified?
Well, we we are members, most of us, of the American Association of Daily Money Managers. We undergo regular background checks. We must adhere to standards of practice, and we carry business insurance.
Okay.
So you definitely are getting professional protection when you work with a daily money manager. Other types of professionals who might provide such services, perhaps for, higher end clients, not higher end necessarily than daily money managers, but, you would obviously need a certain threshold, I suppose, of funds in order to maybe enlist your accountant or attorney or investment manager also to serve as your fiduciary. But you should check definitely with your trusted professional about any potential conflicts of interest. So for instance, I have a client where her longstanding investment, she had asked that her longstanding investment manager serve as her power of attorney. Actually, in that case, it was her trustee because she had a revocable trust, and he agreed to do so, but he then switched the management of her investments to his colleague in the firm to avoid a conflict of interest.
Oh, good idea. Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay. Well, thank you, Arlene. That was really a lot of good information that I think my listeners will certainly be able to, not only useful, but be able to put it into practice. And if you don't mind, I will put the group's website in the description of this video. in case they want to check you out. Is that okay if they contact you or?
Oh, absolutely. We would welcome
Okay,
context. Thank you very much.
okay, I will do that. Well, thank you, listeners, for joining us today. Be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel, where I will have more guests like Arlene Glotzer, giving us some really valuable advice and really good pointers for planning and organizing for our future. And be sure and give this video a like and circle back in the next day or so. Thank you.